Alright, hey guys, welcome back to another tutorial here. Today's tutorial, it's gonna be two parts. The first part is gonna be going over things like path nodes, pathing, spawning enemies, and doing enemy waves and things like that. And the second part is gonna be about the traps that I created in this arena here. There's a couple different traps, like these are like little minefields you can set to explode whenever someone touches them. This is a trap door that if it gets touched enough, it'll pull out from under you and you'll fall to your death. And then this area here is a small little nook that you can kind of seclude yourself in. There's only one point of entry once these doors close, and it has a time limit where it stays closed for 15 seconds before opening up. There's a bunch of stuff going on here. That's why I want to split it up into two. And it's kind of why it took a while to actually record this and everything. There was a lot going on in this tutorial, but it was a lot of fun. I did learn a lot as well. So let me go ahead and jump on in, and we'll take a look and see what it does.
You are on red.
So we spawn in. We'll have enemies spawn. Okay, and we got these jump pads. I'll show you how these jump pads work as well.
First blood.
There's that guy. Oh man, he's got a rocket launcher. Let's see if I can lure him into a trap. He's not having any of that. Get in my trap, bro. Oh. Leave me alone. He's not getting in my trap. I'll set this other one too. Let's see if he falls for it all. Oh man. Got right in the face. Got him. There we go. Boom. Lols. And then we got more enemies spawning. And they kind of spawn randomly from room to room. Oh, he died. Oh, right in the pit. Holy crap. Oh, jeez. Alright. You get the gist of it, so now a couple seconds later, new enemies will spawn in. And that's the basic gist of it, how the whole arena works. So let's take a look at the Kismet sequence. As you can see, there's a bunch going on. We have a handful of variables for spawn points, integers, booleans, everything like that. The booleans are primarily used for the traps and everything, but I'm not going to break it down really right now what everything's doing, but what we'll go ahead and do, since this is everything we need, we're going to go ahead and delete everything. So now we're starting us right from the beginning. So the first thing we're going to do, well, the first thing I'm going to explain is really path nodes before we even start, scripting anything. So these actors here, these are path nodes. As you can see, they have arrows associated with them. Those don't really matter which direction these path nodes are going. They need to be at least, I believe they have to stay within either 500, I think it's 512 units, Unreal units away from each other. At the very minimum here. So you can keep them kind of close together, just spread them out. These will allow the enemies to know exactly where they can, move to. They can all move across here. So you spread them out as likely as you like, as many as you want. There's also a second option. It's called pylons. Pylons are a little different than the path nodes. Pylons is just one actor, and when you build paths using a pylon, it'll actually show you in color where enemies can walk, where they can't walk, things like that. Areas where they can walk will be in green. But when I tried using the pylon, it didn't really work out as well as just using the path nodes here. So I went with that, and as you can see, I can spread them out everywhere here. And also I threw in some things like health, ammo. These are all found in the actor classes. If you were just to type in weapon, you'll be able to find the weapon lockers, and if you type in ammo, you'll be able to find all these ammos, and if you do, I believe it's just pick up, you'll be able to do, you know, base armor, shields, all this different health, U damage, everything like that. All these actors are in there, so all you would do is just select them and just throw them right into the level. And then, what else we added here are these jump pads. If you were to go back into actor classes, type in jump pad, or just jump, you would just drag this actor in, and this is what you'll see. And if you hit F4 on your keyboard with it selected, you'll bring up its properties. The only thing you need to do is tell it what path node target it's going to land at. So for this one, I selected this path node. So when you jump on this jump pad, you land right at this path node. And then the same thing for this jump pad. When we jump across, we land right at this path node. So what you would do is select the jump pad, get its properties up, and then hit this lock. It'll lock the selection, so when you click other actors, this menu won't go away or change. So once this is locked, you would go ahead and select the path node you want to land at, and then you hit this green arrow, and it will lock that in. And you would need to build paths again for it to work, but AI can use this, you can use it. It's pretty interesting and pretty fun. It does require a certain amount of, I guess, open space. So if this ceiling was a little bit lower than it is right now, either you would hit your head on the ceiling, or you wouldn't even launch properly. It would say, hey, there's not enough room for me to actually build the path between this jump pad and this path node. So just keep that in mind for sure. So the last thing that's kind of unique in this level here are these actors right here. If you hit F4, they're just called door markers. These are actually for the AI. When I was first setting up this level, I did not know about these actors, actually, the door markers. So when I tried getting the enemies to spawn in these little rooms here, when they try to get to the door and activate the trigger to actually open the door on their end, it wouldn't activate, or they wouldn't know how to do it. They weren't able to actually walk through it or not. And then I did a little research in the UDN, and I found these door markers. So if we hit F4 with these selected, what it'll ask for, it says My Door. You would just select the interactor associated with that, with the door you want. So for this actor, it would be this door, this interactor here. And then the door type, it's either going to be shoot or touch. Mine is just touch. You touch this volume. So if you see this trigger volume right here, once you touch that volume, I want the door to open, so it's a touch event. And then the door trigger itself is the trigger volume. That's how the whole matinee sequence will be triggered by. So you select them, you put them into here, and you lock them in. And you do it on each individual door, or however you end up setting your level or your scene. You would just associate your door marker with your specific interactor. You would tell it how it functions. Is it touch or is it by shooting? And then you would just tell it what's the trigger for it, and it's going to be your trigger volume or just an actual trigger actor. And the door marker can also be found in actor classes. If you just type in door, you'll see door marker. You just click it and then drag it into your scene, and you'll get this actor here. So hopefully that breaks it down pretty clearly about all these path nodes and everything like that. So the very first thing we're going to do here is we're going to set up the spawning for our enemies here. So let's go into Kismet. And one of the first things we're going to do is create our spawn object variables. There's going to be 4 spawn points in general, 1 for each room. So 1 and then 2, and on the same side, 3 and 4. Those 4 doors are where all the enemies are going to spawn from. And in particular, they're going to spawn from the furthest path node in this room. So we'll do it like this. We'll select that path node, right click, do new object variable using path node 101. Zoom in on the object variable. We're going to name this spawn point 1. We're going to do that with all 4 of the path nodes associated with each room. So we're going to do the second path node. We're going to name it appropriately as well. We're going to do spawn point 2. We're going to do that for 3 and 4. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Select your path node, right click, do a new object variable using that path node, and then we're going to name it spawn point 3. And last but not least, spawn point 4. Now that we have that all set up, let's just group these guys together. Holding down Control and Alt, left click drag, and marquee selection. Hit C on the keyboard to get a comment, and we'll do spawn point variables. Okay, now that we have all our variables set up, let's go ahead and set up how these doors are going to be activated. So let's go ahead. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to do it for one door first, and all we really need to do is copy and paste the sequence that we create for that one door, and then just replace the variables for each individual door, so we save ourselves some time. So let's go ahead and do door number 1 over here. Let's go ahead and select the trigger volume. I tried to do it a little bit as the shape of the door just to match it kind of better. But with that volume selected, let's go into Kismet here. Let's right click and do a new event using trigger volume 1, and we can do a touch event. There's going to be a couple things we need to do in the properties of this touch event. The first thing is we don't really need a touch type. Let's just remove all of them so that there's no class proximity types and there's no ignored class proximity types. So we don't want any of that. That's fine. All that means is it's going to accept everything and whoever touches it. But what we're going to do is down here under force overlapping, what this is basically saying is we're going to force the player to be overlapping at the time of activation. So that means if we have this checked, we want to have the player overlapping with this trigger volume when it gets activated. If we don't want that, we actually don't want the player to activate this at all. So we're going to uncheck that. We're going to set the max trigger count to 0, so this can be activated an infinite amount of times. And last but not least, under here where it says player only, we're going to uncheck that because we don't want the player to activate this at all. So what we're going to do now is our enemies are going to be, let me start out with this. The player, when they spawn, are always on player team 0. And we're going to have our enemies all on team 1. They're all going to be on the same team for this one. So what we're going to do, because we only want the enemies to activate the trigger for the door to open, we only want them to be able to open and close that door to get into that secret room where they spawn. We don't want the player to do that. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to New Action, Team, and Get Team Number. So we're going to put touch into the Get Team Number. And what this node does is it gets the team number of the target that you select and puts that number into a variable for us. So our target is actually going to be an empty object variable that we're going to connect to Instigator and into the target. So basically we're saying whoever touches this trigger volume, get their team number and then put it into a variable for us. So we're just going to do an empty integer variable. Even though this is 0, it doesn't mean the value of it is 0. All this means is as soon as this volume is touched, the team number is going to be replaced. So 0 is going to be replaced with either team 1 or team 0. If the player touches it, it'll be team 0. But if the enemies touch it, it'll be team 1. So once we do get the team number, what we're going to want to do is compare integers. So let's go to new condition, compare. Let's go ahead and compare ints here. So our first comparison is just going to be the team number. And since we only want the enemies to really activate this matinee animation we're going to create, we want to compare it with the new integer, but we're going to compare it with the number 1 because the enemies are going to be on team number 1. And then now what we're going to do is create a matinee. So if you hold down the M key and left click, it'll create a new matinee sequence for us. And we're going to do when A equals B, we're going to play this animation. So basically, when the team number of the player that touches this this trigger volume around our door, if their team number is team number 1, the door is going to open for them. And then if it's not team 1, the door is not going to open at all. There's not going to be any animation at all. But last but not least, what we're going to do is untouched. We're going to go into a reverse of this matinee sequence. So what's going to happen is our matinee is going to be an animation of the door. So let's go ahead, double click on the matinee sequence here, and making sure your object is an interactor. If you don't know how to make an interactor from a static mesh, you right click on it, go down to convert, and the object for the option for mover will be available for you, and then you make it a mover. As a heads up, like always with movers, their collision is set automatically to no collision, so set it to block all so there is collision. So let's make sure with our object selected, let's right click into this gray area of matinee. Let's do door open. Right click on that new group you created, add a new movement track, and we're going to make this about 0.5 seconds long. So it already creates a keyframe for us once we make a movement animation here. So we create a second keyframe and then take our object and just move it right on up. So let's see if it plays right. There we go. Perfect. So we have that for the first door. So it's this one at the bottom here. So what we're going to do actually, just to make things easier for us, we're going to copy and paste this whole sequence. And we're just going to update the variable information here. So since now we have 2 trigger volume 1 events, let's grab our other trigger volume for this door here. With that selected, let's right click on the copied touch event and hit assign trigger volume to events. So it'll update with that trigger volume. And then we're also going to select the door intervector itself. Right click on that, and let's update it with the right intervector. Let's just make sure these are empty. All right, perfect. So we're going to do that again for the next 2 doors, and then our doors are set up. So let's go to the other side. So select the other trigger volume, right click on the copied one, assign trigger volume to that event, and then the same thing goes for the door. So let's update this variable so we get that all updated. And we're going to do this one last time, just since we have 4 doors. Let's go to the 4th door, let's select the trigger volume, right click on this to update it, and the same thing goes for the door itself. So we know that's working now. So let's go ahead and select all these door related information here, or the logic. Select them all. Let's make a comment saying spawning rooms. And then also with all these selected, right click, hit down create new sequence, and let's just do spawn rooms. So it creates a little box for us here. So now if we double click, it'll open up this for us and we see everything we need to here regarding the doors. So that is all set up. So I'm glad we got that all taken care of here. So the next thing we're going to have to set up here is just the basic spawning of the enemies. So let's go ahead, and we need a couple of variables here. One's going to be an empty object variable. So let's go to new variable. Let's do object, and then an object, so it's empty. Actually, let's go back into the spawning rooms here. Actually, we don't need to be there, I believe. So now we have an empty object variable. This one I'm going to name it. I'm going to name it enemies. These will allow us to reference each enemy that spawned from our actor factories for AI. It'll allow us to keep track of each individual one, be able to access each individual enemy, keep track of them, see how many number of enemies there are, how many you've killed, things like that. The next thing we're going to need to create is an object list. So let's go to new variable, object list. And let's name this enemy list. So an object list actually is one variable that can store any number of individual object variables. So it's going to allow us to keep track of each individual enemy, keep them in a nice, neat list, and we'll be able to access each and every one of them. And that will allow us to actually track how many enemies have spawned, how many you've killed, how many can respond to death, everything like that. And it's really, really convenient for us. So let's go ahead and now that we created those, let's just select all of them, let's comment them, and let's just name them object variables. Perfect. So let's go ahead and set up our first wave. The first wave is going to start right at the very beginning of the level. So that means we want a level loaded event. So let's go to right click, new event, level loaded. Perfect. And level loaded can only spawn really once. It can't be activated more than once because the level is only loaded once, but that's beside the point here. So what we're going to do, just in order to spawn enemies now, let's go to new action, actor factory. So actor factory is a huge node, gives you a lot of power here. And let's go ahead and break down some of the things we need to change in this properties. Let me go ahead and open up this a little bigger for us. So first thing is we need to get the type of factory we want. There's a bunch in here. What we want is UT Factory AI. Towards the bottom of the list. Once you select that, you're given options to force deathmatch AI, use compartment, which is try and use physics hardware for the spawned object, everything like that. You can change the controller class, the pawn class. You can give each pawn a name. You can give them default inventory. You can give them custom weapons. You can do a lot of cool stuff here. So let's go ahead. We want to force the deathmatch AI. We want them to start attacking you right away. Let's also use compartment so they can try to use physics and everything correctly here. So the controller class, this is something not a lot of people know about, or what the proper controller class is going to be. We're actually going to leave it to none. The controller class is none. For some reason, when you select any other ones, they either don't react properly or they don't move at all. So we're going to leave it at none. And then the pawn class itself, we're going to do UT pawn. This is our default pawn for the enemies here. So what we're going to do next, for this first wave, we're going to give them the default inventory, which I believe is the link gun. No, nothing else like a berserker thing or rocket launchers or jump boots, anything like that. It's just normal enemy with a link gun. We're going to start out pretty easy, pretty simple. But one thing we want to do here is team index. Right now it's set to 255. What we want to do is set it to number 1. We want this team number to be number 1 here. And then that's all of the variables here that we're going to change, besides the ones towards the bottom here. Spawn count, we're actually going to set that to 0. I'll tell you why in a moment, but the spawn delay, we're going to set that to 2 seconds, just so there's a delay in the number of spawns. So what we're going to do, our spawn point, since this is our first wave, we want these enemies to come from spawn point 1. So if we look back at where spawn point 1 is, it's this bottom room here. So back into Kismet. Let's go ahead, create a new name variable. So new variable, name variable. Expected type is object. And then our name is spawn point 1. So we'll hook it up to our spawn point. So we're basically telling, hey, any enemies that are coming from this actor factory, they're going to come from spawn point number 1. Now for the spawn section, it's going to be an empty variable, but it's going to be the one we created already, the enemies one. So we're going to put whatever spawned, so those enemies that are spawned, we're going to put them into that enemy's object, just the object variable, not the list. So let's copy and paste this name variable since it's already an object. And let's change the name to enemies. And we still have the check mark, so let's hook that up as well. And for spawn count, we're actually going to need something pretty unique here. It's called random int. So let's right click, new variable, int, random int. So we're going to give it a spectrum from 2 to 5 enemies. We're going to plug this in. So every time the level's loaded, what's going to happen is between 2 to 5 enemies are going to be spawned from this actor factory. They're all going to be on team 1, and they're all going to be given the default inventory of that link gun. All these enemies are going to be spawning from this first spawn point. There's going to be a 2-second delay between each one, and they're all going to be put into this enemy's object variable here. So that's all that really does. That's our initial spawning of these enemies here. So we want the enemies to do, once they're spawned, we want them to move to the player to get to them as fast as possible. So what we're going to do, believe it's under AI, and then move to actor. So we're going to plug that in. And so our target is going to be all the enemies here. The destination is going to be the player. So let's go ahead and create a player variable for ourselves here. So holding down the P key and left clicking, it gives us a player variable. And we want to uncheck all players and just leave it at player 0. And let's just name this variable player. So let's go ahead, copy and paste the named object variable, change the name to player, it should update properly, and then make that the destination. So the player is going to be the destination the entire time here. So the next thing we're going to do is set up a trace. A trace is basically when an enemy has a visible sight of the player, or whichever you want it to be. So if it does have sight of the player, we want him to start firing at him, but if he doesn't, we don't want him to start firing. We don't want him really to waste bullets. We want to kind of make these guys look a little smart. So we need a trace. So let's go to new action. I believe it is under MISC, and then trace. So the start is going to be the enemy. The end is going to be the player. So the trace is going to start from the enemy and it's going to go to the player. If it's not obstructed, we want to start firing at the player. So let's go to New Action, AI, start firing at. Put that in. And then our target is going to be the enemies. These are going to be who do we want to start firing at in terms of who's going to do the firing, who's going to shoot their weapon. And then the fire at is going to be the player. But then if it's obstructed, if the field of view or the kind of the sight line between the enemy and the player is obstructed by an object or another enemy, we don't want the enemy to be firing at all. So let's go to New Action, AI, stop firing. And the only target we're going to put in is enemies. So we just set up some basic behavior for the enemy, just so we want to move to the player. We want to shoot at the player whenever we do have a visible sightline, and we want to stop firing at the player once the sightline is obstructed by static meshes, other enemies, things like that. But the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to add all these enemies that are spawned from this actor factory into our object list. So let's go ahead, right-click, New Action, Object List, and then Modify Object List. And with Modify Object List, we're basically telling every time an enemy is spawned, that enemy is going to be added to our object list, just so we can reference each individual enemy on a per enemy basis, essentially here. So let's plug finished into add to list. So our object reference is going to be the enemies. And then our object list variable is obviously going to be our enemy list variables here. So let's copy and paste a name variable. Change the expected type to object list. And then what we're going to do here is we're just going to change the name of that variable to enemy list. So just throw that in there. And then for the enemy list count entries, this is going to tell us how many enemies are currently in this list. So we do need to create a new variable. It's going to be an integer. So let's go right click, new variable, int, and just a normal int. We're going to leave it at 0, and we're just going to name this enemy count. So let's go back over here, copy and paste our name variable, change the expected type to integer, change the name to enemy count. Plug that in. We got that all set up. So what we're going to do, what we're basically trying to set up here is a way to keep track of how many enemies are alive, how many enemies are dead, and based on how many enemies are dead, how many enemies are still alive, we're going to start spawning more enemies here, so it just continues and gets more and more difficult for the player. So what we're going to do here, the next step is to attach an event to each individual enemy here. So let's go to Actor. Actually, no, it's under Event. Attach to Event here. Let's plug these two together. So the attachee, who's getting something attached to them? So it's going to be the enemies. And the event that they're going to be attached to is the death event. So let's go to New Action. I believe it's under Event, and then Pawn, and then Death. So all you need to do is plug the event into the event here. So now we're attaching the death event to each player, or not each player, but each enemy. So when each enemy dies is essentially what's happening. So every time an enemy dies, we want something to happen here, and we want to set the max trigger count to 0. And that's all we need to really change for this one. And then we're going to copy and paste the modify object list here. And every time an enemy dies, we want to remove them from that list. So for instigator and the object reference, it's going to be the enemy variable. For the object list variable, it's going to be our enemy list. And then for our enemy count, it's going to be this one. So that's all set up here. But there is one last thing I want to do. Let's make a copy and paste of this enemy count variable. Let's change the name to dead enemies. And then let's go ahead, copy and paste this variable, change its name to dead enemies. And what we're going to do is every time you kill an enemy here and every time they're removed from the list, we're going to add 1 to the number of dead enemies that the player has killed, just to keep track of that. So it's right click, New Action, Math, Add Int. Plug that in. So A is going to be the dead enemies. B is going to be the number 1, because we're going to add 1 to it. And then the int result is also going to be dead enemies. So basically, if dead enemies is at 0, we add 1 to it. And now the new result is dead enemies equaling 1. It'll be able to keep on adding 1 and adding 1 as enemies are killed. So let's go ahead and see if this works at all. So let's go ahead and jump in. Actually, let's go ahead and create a log for a couple of things here. We're going to do enemy count and the number of dead enemies. So let's do a new level loaded event. So right click, new event, level loaded. And when you hold down the L key and left click, you will get a log. So the target is going to be the player. So let's just grab a player variable. And let's right click, expose a variable, and we're going to expose an integer variable. And we're going to plug in both dead enemies and enemy count into that, and it'll display both of those. And then we just want to create a loop just so it keeps updating for us every second. And then plug it towards the back here. Let's actually select all that, hit C. Let's just do debug, just so we know what it is. Put it towards the top. So let's see if this works. Let's see if enemies spawn. They'll be spawning from this room here. So let's right click and play from here.
You are on red.
There we go. See in the corner here, we have 2 enemies and then 0. And let's go ahead and start killing them. Or if they kill us. Oh man, you're doing work on me. And now we have 1 and 1, so there's 1 enemy alive and 1 enemy dead. Now there's 0 enemies alive and 2 that are dead. And right now the enemies don't continue to spawn. We haven't set up that logic yet, but we know these the list for the objects working. We know we can count our enemies now. So it's really convenient. It gives us a lot of power and a lot of control. So let's go ahead and just disconnect this debug so we don't get that debug log anymore. And what we're going to do now, we're going to set up a main hub here for the enemy spawn waves. We're going to make it so that it will continually happen. It'll be going on forever, essentially here. And it'll allow us to have an infinite number of waves until the player dies, and it will just keep on going for us. Alright, so what we're going to do here is we're going to create a new event. It's going to be a remote event, so a new event, and then remote event. And we're going to call this start enemy waves. And we're also going to need a new action event, and then activate remote event. We're going to have to activate this remote event one way or another. So what we're going to do here is once the enemies are spawned, we're going to start the enemy wave sequence. Let's go ahead and update this just so they match. Now they're updated. So basically what's going to happen is when the start enemy waves event is fired, which means as soon as the actors or enemies are spawned, that's when it's going to fire. Once it's fired, we want to compare integers here. So it's right click, new condition, comparison, and then compare int. What we're comparing, all we want to do is compare and see how many enemies are currently in play or active right now fighting the player. So every time there's 0 enemies, we want to go ahead and spawn more. If there is anything more than 0 enemies, it's not going to spawn any more enemies until that last wave's been defeated. So what we're going to do, we need the enemy count variable here. So let's grab that. That's going to be your A, and then B is just going to be an empty integer. It's going to be number 0. So we're basically saying if the enemy count is greater than 0, that's when we're going to start spawning more. But if it's not, if it's greater than, we want to go ahead, set a delay of 1 second, and we're going to tell it to compare it again. And we're going to do the same thing if it's less than, just so we have a continuous loop every second of the enemy count being compared to the number 0. And then once it is equal to 0, we're actually going to do something pretty cool. It's a new node I didn't really know about. I knew about it, but I didn't really have a good application for it. But now I see where it can be used. So let's right click, new action. It's down here under switch, and it's a random switch. So what we're going to do when A equals B, so when the enemy count, the number of enemies currently active fighting the player, Once they're equal to 0, when there's none left, we're going to do a random link, or switch I should say. And in here, the link count's going to be 4 because there's 4 different spawn rooms. And what we're going to do, increment amount is going to be 1. And then looping is going to be checked here. And that's all we're going to really need to do. So what we're going to have happen here is if, so it randomly picks link 1, link 2, link 3, or link 4 randomly every time it's activated. So what we're going to do, we're going to create new remote events. We're going to just do activate remote events right now. We're just going to name these spawn point 1. And then we're going to do spawn point 1 through 4. So let's create individual ones here. Alright, now we have all 4. So link 1 is going to go to spawn point 1. Link 2 is going to go to spawn point 2. Link 3 is going to go to spawn point 3. Link 4 is going to go to spawn point 4. So now all we really need to do is create the logic for all the spawn points here. So I made individual basis spawn points and everything like that, what each enemy is going to be doing. So before we do that, let's go ahead and comment this one. We're going to name this spawn initial enemies. Now we have that. We're also going to name this one, select everything, hit C. We're going to do spawn waves hub. This is our main hub here. So let's go ahead and do each individual spawn point, all the logic we'll need. They're all going to be very, very, very similar to the initial wave here. So let's go ahead and copy this. Just copy the logic of the nodes. Copy and paste that. What we're going to do, instead of it being level loaded, we're going to create a new remote event. So go under new event, remote event, and we're going to name this spawn point 1. Make sure it updates. Perfect. And we're going to go into spawn actor. And for the first spawn point, we're going to leave everything exactly how it is. We want to keep these guys having only the link gun. So let's go ahead, select all these guys, and do spawn point 1 logic. So all these will all have the same enemy link list, the list of the enemy counts, the actual list itself, having the attached event of death. We'll be able to keep track of these as long as we copy and paste it correctly. So let's go ahead and copy and paste the whole spawn point 1 logic here. We're going to rename the comment spawn point 2 logic. So to select the comment, just change the 1 to a 2. And we're also going to update the name from spawn point 1 to spawn point 2. To make sure it updates properly in the hub. And we're also going to change the variable from spawn point 1 to spawn point 2. Now it's going to be the fun part where we get to kind of make custom waves here. So for the second spawn point, what we're going to do, we're going to have enemies here. We're going to uncheck give default inventory. We're actually going to give them a custom one. So let's go ahead, hit the plus sign here next to inventory list. With this one, we're going to give them rocket launchers. And we're also going to give them jump boots. So now it's a unique wave here from whenever they spawn from spawn point 2. So let's go ahead and copy paste spawn point 2 logic. We're going to update the same information here. So change the comment from spawn point 2 to spawn point 3. Change the initial remote event from spawn point 2 to spawn point 3. Lastly, we're going to change the variable from spawn point 2 to spawn point 3. And then in the actor factory here, we're going to change the custom inventory list. We're going to give these guys the let's go ahead and give these guys the U damage. I believe that makes them a little harder, that makes the weapons a little stronger. And we're going to give them the shock rifle. Perfect. And go ahead, that updated properly here. So we're going to just do the last wave here, the last spawn point wave. So change that to spawn point 4. Change the actual comment to spawn point 4 logic. then change the actual variable to spawn point 4. So that is all updated properly here, which is awesome. So all we need to do now is just give it individual inventory list. We're gonna give these guys a lot here. These guys are gonna be the hardest ones. So we're gonna leave U2, U damage. We're gonna leave the shock rifle, but we're also gonna add rocket launcher, and then also jump boots. And that's it. You can add any number of spawn points and logic to this. It's very open-ended. All I wanted to do was 4 spawn points, 4 rooms they'll come out of, and each wave or each spawn point enemy will be given a unique set of inventory to make them a little harder or a little different in terms of their strategy, what you need to do to defeat them. And we also have them all following that logic here, so that they're all added to the enemy list, they're all taken track of, we all know where they're going to be and what they're doing. So let's go ahead and test and see if this works. Before we do, let me go ahead and comment these doing integer variables. And also, I forgot to mention in the very beginning here, under View in World Properties, in order for everything to work properly, we need to change the default game type to UT Team Game, and also the game type for the Play-in Editor, or PIE. Change that to UT Team Game, and now allow for teams to spawn, and you'll be put on a team, and everything will be much, much smoother here for us. So let's go ahead and see if this works at all. So let's go ahead and jump in.
You are on red.
So enemies should have spawned. Here they go.
First blood.
Alright, cool. So they're spawning, but they're not really killing me or anything. Oh, they see me now. Okay. Alright, we killed those guys. So, oh, here comes the next spawn. Oh man, yeah, they killed me. But let's go ahead. I believe they're all defeated here. Okay, so let's see if the next enemy spawned. Oh, there's a guy. Oh, he didn't even make it. Oh, he's right there. Oh, he's coming over. Got him. Alright, so let's see what the next wave's gonna do. Oh my. Dead. Awesome. Oh. Yep, and it's working. Perfect. So we have all these enemies spawning. And they're all unique, they're all different. They kind of avoid me, it looks like. Oh, this guy saw me. But we know it's working, so that's perfect. So that's everything we're going to go over on this tutorial here. All these spawn point logics and everything like that. We got the spawn room set up, we all did that correctly. So what I would recommend for anyone who has any more questions about path nodes, or these door markers, or even these jump pads, there's a website. It's just the UDN, that stands for the Unreal Developers Network. It has all the information in there. You would just search by what you're looking for. It'll pull up all the articles and information you need. So on the second part of this tutorial, you'll see this up next soon. It's going to go over all the traps that we have here, just to break down the traps for the next video. We have these landmines that you can set to activate. So let's go ahead and play and I'll show you.
You are on red.
Oh, okay. I forgot we deleted the logic here. So I'll just explain what they're going to be doing. So you'll be able to set these traps. You'll say press E to set trap. You press E. The light of the mesh will go from yellow to red, indicating that it is set. And then if an enemy or you touches it, it'll explode and you'll die. The next trap here is a trap floor. It'll have a random thing where it will randomly pull out from under you depending on how many times someone has walked over it. So it'll allow for people just to randomly die. It's kind of like a random element. And then last, it's not really a trap, but it's a seclusive area. We're going to go ahead and if you're able to activate this computer monitor here, the doors here, and then the door over here, they'll close. So you'll be secluded for about 15 to 20 seconds. And the only way in and out is through this one opening. So it really allows you to control, where you are, where the enemies are, and things like that, just to add a little bit of more strategy and dynamic elements to the level here. So that's it for this first part tutorial. So I hope you guys, learned a lot. This was actually a really fun thing for me to try to do and learn. Definitely learned a lot. So I'll see you guys next time. I definitely appreciate you all. Have a good one. Bye.